to think about, because the dominant thing we have to think about as a country is death. And I can guarantee you, we can do all the other things correct. Any small indication that we are not able to service is catastrophic more than any other thing we are doing as a country. I think I leave that there. Umeshika what I'm trying to say. And you know, they say restructuring is the first chapter of default, because the same analogy I gave, if I owe you money, 3 of you, and I've called you one to talk, what are we talking about? We are talking about, I may not pay you next month, I'll pay you 3 months from now. So I'm restructuring. So what if in those 2 months I've not paid you, what have I done? Haven't I defaulted? Now, lastly, I want to talk about revenue. There is something called revenue maximizing tax rate. That is a term that should be given a department in the Department of the National Treasury. Revenue maximizing tax rate. You know, many times we confuse that you add tax rate, you get more revenue. It is a fallacy. At some point you get to Rafa's curve and it starts descending. That the more you increase, the more you distort economic decisions. So if I was to buy a car, I see you've already paying for my money, so I hold back that expenditure. Holding back that expenditure means even the little you could have gotten, you'll not get it. That is something I have seen we have also to take very seriously as a country. So that even as we make tax policies and revenue policies, let's look, and it cannot be arbitrary. I mean, you cannot just sit down and say, now tunapeleka hii kodi hapa, you get more money. There has to be some research based on it. There has to be some thorough analysis based on it. There has to be thorough sampling. There has to be thorough work in it by coming up with a rate that maximizes revenue without making people distort their economic decisions or market to distort its decision making. We did the finance bill of 2023, which was fairly debated as the one for last year. Now, this is the most shocking thing. The Kenyan revenue to GDP ratio in the year 2023-2024 was around 16%. I want you to see the trend. In the year 2019-2020 was around 15%. In the year 2023, that year, was 14 point something percent. In this current year, up to date, it is around 14.7%. Now, when you do robust revenue raising measures in terms of policy, they should come with commensurate revenue from it. Kodi ikiongezewa, for example, pay, there should be commensurate revenue in the basket of revenue from this money you have taxed. Tunashikana hapo. Why is it that even when you raise the rate, then in the basket of money, there is not that money? Why is it that the revenue growth in Kenya never noticed finance bill of 2023? That the graph, if you are given a graph without labeling, you will not pinpoint those 2 years. You will not see them because the revenue never changed other than the ordinary changes it usually has. I'm talking about that analysis of revenue maximizing tax rate. Why is it that even when we have a very corrosive, when we have a very debatable policy around tax and it passes, why is it that we cannot see this money in the other side? Possibly this could be the reason. You come, maybe you are earning some money here, the government takes it at the pay level. Napenda kuita unakatia stima kwa transformer. You know, when money is deducted from your pay, ni kama stima imekatiwa kwa transformer. So it actually never reaches your hands. Now, when you cut money from the pay level, when you cut money at that level, let's say in my disposable income, you already knock off 8,000 shillings from it. That is the money you are sending your uncle somewhere in Nyamira. That is the money you are sending your auntie somewhere in Kisii. Now, you no longer send them that money. So they no longer buy that sugar they were buying through the transfer you are doing. So you have cut money here at the payee level, but the same money denies you correction at the VAT level. Those are some of the things we have to work around, so that even as we increase taxes, then we are not handicapping the same revenue collection. There is another thing I want to talk about very briefly, which you have to be vigilant as a country. In Nigeria is one of the economies, by the way, which are very good. It has very rich people in terms of, in Africa, you only get black billionaires, majority of them being domiciled in Lagos, Nigeria, out of Nigerian money. Now, Dangote cement, BOA cement, they grew around what? You come and put in some duty for imports of the commodities they manufacture, primarily cement. By that time, when you put duty on cement, I'm using Nigeria, you end up having a big conglomerate and several of them. Number one, of course, we know Dangote cement, BOA cement, there is also Lafarge and the others. So now you cut off imports. It's a good thing, fine. The question is, for how long? You cutting off meaning you build a wall of tariff, not necessarily a non-tariff barrier, but a tariff one. So you put in a wall. This wall should incentivize this local production to be efficient, so that their products can compete with the global ones. But then you overstay with that policy. So Nigeria, by beginning of this year, had the highest cement prices in Africa. Can you see that oxymoron? The biggest producers had the highest cement prices in Africa and had the highest cement margins almost in the world. You protect an industry that must come in with an analysis for how long. And there should be government follow-up on, when we protect you, up to when can Kenyans continue to pay more for you to get efficient? Because I am here as a consumer in Kenya. The cement prices in Kenya today have gone up. So what am I doing as a Kenyan buyer of cement? I am actually subsidizing as a Kenyan the production of the producer of cement. I am paying a higher price. It is a good thing. It may end up employing many more Kenyans. But the reason for protectionism must not be for longevity of production in this company. It should be up to the point where this company gets competitiveness in competing with any other cement from any other country. If I can import cement, let's say from Mozambique, I'm just using an abstract example, or from South Africa. If I can import a bag of cement from South Africa and it gets to Taita Taveta at a lower price than the cement being produced several kilometers away from that place, I mean, that's also a paradox. Protectionism all along must not be for the benefit of the producer. It must be for the benefit of the economy. And that is why it has to be time-bound. Very lastly, some of the things I think we should do as a country. Number one is to take institutional reforms very seriously. If you look at the regression of economic growth from China, from all the other countries, institutional reforms takes up a sizable influence on the dynamics of economic growth. sio kupaka mafuta. You know, in Kenya we come rebrand an agency and we call it institutional reform. We need to be very deliberate. Institutional reform must incorporate the size of government. Kenya can act optimally with half of the government we have in terms of its size. We can cut the government into half across everything. Government, if government is a loaf of bread, you can cut it by half. All the resources of government, you can cut it by half, and my grandmother will not notice. What am I trying to say? That service delivery will not be hampered. Institutional reform must be deliberate and must be objective. The other thing, the Euro bond we borrowed, for example, the one I to retire the 6.8%, we borrowed around 30% higher price to pay another one. I wish we did a few things instead of borrowing more. Kenya has got assets. And some of these assets, we bought them for commercial purpose alone. Government invests in institutions for many factors, strategic reasons. There is also commercial reasons. In the year 2020, Safaricom market capitalization was around 1.5 trillion Kenya shillings. 1.5 trillion. The government of Kenya owns 35% of Safaricom. 20% of that Safaricom at the market cap then of 1.5 trillion is 300 billion. Only 30% alone. You could have raised 300 billion without borrowing anything. But some people will argue, but you know, why would you sell it? It gets dividend. I mean, even in the investment arena itself, you take the amount of money the government cumulatively has received in dividends. It may need to receive dividends for hundreds of years for it to match this kind of investment.